the mayor of Baltimore. So welcome to Shio, Mayor Catherine Pugh. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence. You know, it was remarkable because when I wanted to host this event in Baltimore, I thought I would go invite the mayor of the city. But I thought, how would the mayor, you know, say a bunch of Africans in diaspora want to meet her and then she would leave everything and come? But I said, you see, what's the worst that can happen? So I went to your website and I left a note, like you said, we should leave a note.
That's right.
And I got a call from Karen Stokes, and she said, what do you want the mayor to come and do? And I said, you know, we're a bunch of African-American women, and we want her to come talk to us, and you're here. Thank you so much.
I'm honored. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And the first one is, you began your career, your political career at 49. And at that time...
No, I think I began my political career long before that.
Ah.
You know, one of the things that I thought always was important is to be engaged in things that are going on in the city. I got elected then. But part of being in politics is being involved and being engaged. So I've been involved in the community for decades, you know, whether it was creating a newspaper to speak specifically to African Americans, or helping to start organizations like Help Unite Baltimore, which was a group of African American women and men focusing on how to make the city more equal, more just, to creating working to create the President's Roundtable, which was an organization that of African American business owners, male and female, who felt that the city had not engaged them or created opportunities for them to do business. And so I came here as a Morgan State University student, and so this is where I grew up. I call it home. I'm originally from Philadelphia, but I came here because I tell people I had parents who loved us all of our lives. I grew up with a mother and a father who was completely engaged with a family who promised all 7 of their children one major thing, and that was that we would all get a high school diploma. So I know that they're smiling down today because all of us did earn a high school diploma. And my brother was the first to start college, not finish college, and he dropped out. So my dad said from then on, you know, anybody who wanted to go had to get themselves together and go on their own. And so I worked 11 at night to 7 a.m. in the morning at a nursing home, would walk a mile and a half, which is why I'm such a great runner, and home, take a shower, bath, change clothes, and go around the corner to Beth's Laboratories, where I worked as a secretary from 8:30 to 4:30 to earn my first semester's tuition to get to Morgan State University, and I moved from there.
Wow, oh my God. You know, the Nigerian street language will say you used to keep the hustle alive.
Absolutely.
And real.
Absolutely.
And you know, when you got into the Baltimore City Council, that was a big move at an age where many of us will think, oh, it's too late for me to do something bold. What would you tell us if I'm thinking?
I don't think that makes sense. I'll tell you that it doesn't make sense. Let me just say, I think it's important for us to set goals and to create opportunities for ourselves. I was very engaged in the community. I had developed, after graduating from Morgan State University, I was a banker, and I was slotted to be one of the rising stars in the banking industry. But I also became a credit analyst, where I analyzed financial statements for businesses, companies, and corporations. And what I didn't see were African Americans coming in so that I could approve lines of credit for them. And so I met this organization called Council for Equal Business Opportunities. And so I left the bank to go work for the Council for Equal Business Opportunities because their mission was to grow and expand African American businesses. So I was really excited. But what I learned was that because of my experience in banking, I was able to challenge the organization to do more by developing relationships with others So I was able to couple and package businesses along with the bank that I came from to help expand and grow businesses. But what I found was at that time, everything was political. You could only lend X amount of dollars, and I would think, well, what if they want to grow to this level? What if they want to go to this level? And I was at an event, and someone asked me if I would like to come and work for the mayor at that time, William Donald Schaefer, and I said, sure. No clue, didn't know what the job was going to be. But here's what I did know, and this is why education is so important, that I was prepared. I was prepared for whatever opportunities presented themselves. And if I didn't know what the job was, I knew I could learn it because I felt that I was that smart, that capable, and had that kind of capacity. And so I actually was the director of crime prevention, so my responsibility was to go out to the communities of the city of Baltimore. Remember now, I'm not really from here, and at that time, and so I would actually go out to neighborhoods and communities, and my responsibility was to make people feel safe about the city. And so I was always about research, looking to see what was going on in other cities. And so I created projects, Operation Identification, Neighborhood Watch. I called it the Women's Crusade Against Crime, my Tea Party ladies that I would organize to go to Annapolis to testify on different pieces of legislation. So I think the key to whatever it is we want to do at whatever age we decided to do it is about being prepared. And I tell people that everything I've done to this moment has prepared me to lead the city, whether it is having worked as a banker, understanding finance, having helped others go into business. I also ran a small business college, Strayer Business College, helping mostly 98% of my population were women, helping them to get back on their feet, to get back into the workplace. In fact, Tanya, who works for me, was a student of mine and was in the first job I got her when I went to Annapolis, and she's still with me today. So we really prepared young women, women who were struggling, women who had left the workplace because they had babies, were trying to get back, women who needed to be trained, so we did that. And I started a newspaper, African American News and World Report, because I wanted to change the image of African Americans in the city. I was an assistant professor of business and economics at Morgan State University, and so I was able to take one of my classes, my marketing class, to do a survey and analysis of how African Americans felt about themselves in the community. And when I collected my survey and was analyzing the survey, at the same time, there was a reporter called Antonio Piatella who was doing a series on the people who had potential power in Baltimore City. And he approached me, he said, I keep asking folks to give me a name, and this was like 30 years ago, give me a name of a female who has potential to have power in the city. And it wasn't that I was all, into power, it was that I was engaged and involved. Whether it was the creation of African American News and World Report, my newspaper, or Hub, or the President's Roundtable, or the marketing study that generated the idea, because when I collected that survey back, the opinions that African Americans had of themselves were so negative in terms of what the media was projecting. And so when Ontario came to me, he said to me, what are you doing? I said, I'm just engaged in this, that, and the other. And he says, well, what do you plan to do? I said, well, right now I'm going to take this survey, and I think I will start a newspaper. Clueless. Had never started a newspaper, had not been in the newspaper business, didn't know anything about how to even put a newspaper together. But what I knew was the information that was shared with me was information that deserved some attention. And changing the image of African Americans in the city was important to me. So the concept of African American News and World Report was to put out a positive image of the African American community, to tell good stories about what's going on in our city, and to take the shade off of things that were not in the best interest of African Americans. And so I did that for about 7, 8 years at the same time. I tell people I've never done one thing at a time. I've always been multitasking. Whether I was teaching at Morgan State University in the morning, or engaged in Hub in the evening, or putting together a newspaper. And I think the key to that was being able to sell people on your idea. That this is going to be the greatest thing, you know, African American News and World Report. Listen to that title, y'all. African American News and World Report. We intend that, you know, because somebody said, well, why would you start a newspaper? There's the Afro. I said, well, why is there time in Newsweek? Nobody asked them why they, you know, why should we only have one publication? Why should we be pigeonholed? I said, you know, we're going to cover, we're going to cover the world. We're going to change the image of African Americans in this country. But what was really funny was that I was so hyped up that people bought into it. You know, they got hyped up. I had people actually would work 12 to 15 hours a day who would sleep on the floor at the newspaper office, you know, and who would ride with me down to the Eastern Shore for 2.5 hours and come 2.5 hours back. And I'll never forget, there was a supermarket in Baltimore called Super Pride, and he had an ad in my newspaper. I would be so tired when I got back. Sometimes I would be sitting in the car asleep, and I'd hear this on the car window. Get up and get those newspapers out. I got my ad in there. And so, I mean, it was just such, you know, and I was young, it was so energizing, and I became, in my own opinion, the ambassador for Baltimore. So if you'd have come to Baltimore at the time that I was doing African American News and World Report, Teniola, I would say, I'd pick up the phone and I'd call you and say, Teniola, this is Catherine Pugh, I'm publisher of African American News and World Report. I'd just like to welcome you to Baltimore. And so I want you to just imagine for the moment getting that phone call, and you're the publisher of the Sun Papers. And I pick up the phone and I say, Reg Murphy, this is Catherine Pugh, publisher of African American News and World Report. He's a new publisher. I just want to welcome you to Baltimore. Wow. And I could honestly feel the response through the phone. It was like, let me see, she's not on this list. She's not on that list. And I could hear him sort of kind of trying to rush me off the phone. And at the same time, his secretary came in and she says, Reg, your guests are here. And he responded, Imogene, tell them I'll be right with them. And then he says to me, maybe we'll have tea one day. I said, okay, thank you, hang up the phone. I picked up the phone immediately and I said, Imogene, I just got through talking to Reg, because that's what she called him. I said, he says to set up tea for us.
My Lord.
So what was supposed to be a 15-minute discussion turned out to be about an hour-and-a-half discussion.
Wow.
And he got to ask me questions about me. I got to talk about the Sun Papers. And about 3 months later, I get a call from Reg Murphy. And he says, I've met everybody in Baltimore I need to know. And there's a person I'd like to hire. And I'm thinking, well, you know, maybe I can be helpful. And he said, it's you. I said, are you serious? He said, I'm a publisher, like you. You know, I said, your job would be the only job at the Sun Papers I would ever want. And we became really good friends. So I stayed in the newspaper business for about 7 years. And when I went out of the newspaper, it was a real struggle, you all, but it was fun. I can point you to people who, in that experience, are reporters today, or who started careers in the media, who were able to go on because they got that byline in the newspaper. And if you know anything about being in the media business, that byline is important. And so they had their name on an article every week, and so they became prominent reporters and so forth throughout this country. But that experience propelled another experience, and that was I became friends with Reg Murphy's wife, the publisher of The Sun, who said to me, even when I went out of the newspaper business, by this time I'm also running Strayer Business College, and she says, Reg really wants you to come work for The Sun. So he calls me up and I said, you know, Reg, I went to meet with him, I said, I'm just not interested in a job at the Sun Papers. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, what I was trying to do, and that was change the image of the African American community out there. Because it's truly my belief that if people in this city got to know positive people in Baltimore, that they would put them on their boards, that they would create opportunities, they would work together, they would partner together, and they would solve problems of the city together. And he said, well, can we do that here? And so I became the only independent editor that the Sun Papers has ever had. Because what I said to Reg is, I can't come inside and work for the Sun, but if I could have my own supplement in your publication that's distributed, it'll get a wider audience, and I think that that would achieve that objective. And so that lasted for the length of time that Reg was at the newspaper, and when he left, they wanted to change the format and come inside, and I just was not willing to do that. But through those years, we created the 50 Leading Black Business List. I've seen African Americans emerge onto boards of companies and corporations. I've seen relationships develop as a result. I ended up doing 5 separate publications in the Sun Paper. So, and that's what I mean by engagement. That engagement began long ago, long before I decided to run for public office, because people knew who I was, but based on the work that I had done. I'd also created a public relations firm, and I used to do marketing communications and raise money for candidates who were running for office. So I got the phone call that said, who are you going to raise money for in the 4th district? And I said, 4th district? It's my district. I'll do that for me. And I did, and I raised money, I won, and I got a seat. So I sat 5 years in the Senate. I know these are long answers, but sometimes you need the backstory.
Yeah, and I think I've taken a lot of notes from what you said, and when you leave, I'm going to be sharing some of these notes because some of us need to hear this, and we need to know this. You became mayor of Baltimore at a very delicate time in Baltimore's history. The city was hurting from Freddie Gray, but crime seems to have gone down on your watch.
Yep.
What are you doing differently?
Well, let me just say, I was out there every day during the Freddie Gray situation. I was on the streets every single day. Part of it was in my senatorial district, but I felt that it was important to be there, to be in front of the community and to try to bring the calm. And I think if you would ask those at the national media level and even the people in the neighborhoods and communities, for me, it was never about the media, it was really about the people. There's a senior building right there at the corner of North Avenue in Pennsylvania, and me and it was Delegate Hayes now, Senator Hayes, we would make sure that the seniors over there were fed, and we would make sure that they were getting their medication. And then just being out in the neighborhood and talking to people and just bringing the calm. I never forget a guy who told me he was running, hey, I want to talk to you because I'm thinking about running for office, and he's jumping up and down on a truck, and I'm like, is that the image that we want for Baltimore? You know, and so it really was just being there for the calm, but I knew what I was walking into. I mean, I'd served on the city council for 5 years. I had been a state senator. I'd served in the House for 1 year. I'd been a state senator for 10, I think going on 11 years. I had become the majority leader, the first African-American majority leader of the Senate in its history. And I had passed more legislation, and I don't mean to brag, but it's true. I passed more legislation in 4 years, that's what the President of the Senate said, than most senators in a 4-year period. By the time I left the Senate, I'd passed almost 200 pieces of legislation over a 10-year period.
So you have quite a list of achievements. When you're not mayor, who are you?
A mayor? No, a servant, servant of the people. I enjoy this work. I tell people every day I pinch myself that I get to do this work because, again, I tell folks, there are critics every day. You can be critical. You can stand on the sidelines and be critical, or you can be in office and criticize, but you can also become a part of the solution. And, when I got elected in January, I did what I call a call to action, because I said, I can't do this work by myself. I need people to be engaged. And so I do listening tours throughout the city. It's nothing to see me knock on your door and say, I just want to talk to you about what's going on in your neighborhood. I created, what we're doing different in terms of violence is that violence kept going up last year. And many of you know that the city's under a consent decree. And a consent decree requires, the Department of Justice requires you to reform your police department. It was a 163-page report. When I came in, there were actually people, including Councilman, saying, you need to turn in a consent decree. Well, there wasn't a document done. There was a 163-page report that laid on my desk, but there was no consent decree for the judge to look at. So I spent my first 60 days working with my city solicitor's office, the police department, and the Justice Department, crafting what I thought was a necessary document because of, not just because of Freddie Gray, but because what people in our city, our state, and our country have endured, especially African Americans, in terms of their interaction or lack thereof with those who we hire to protect and serve. And I can tell you, having been engaged in the police department at the level that I've been engaged, I'm proud because I know that the work that they've done, and I know that there are many people inside of that police department who are engaged every day to do the right thing. Are there problems? Absolutely. Should changes be made? Definitely. That consent decree we did in 60 days, what some cities took 13 to 14 months to craft. And people told me under this administration, the Trump administration, it would never get signed. So don't worry about it. Not only did it get signed, it is now implemented. So through that 6 or 7 month period, it was really preparing the city for the consent decree. While crime was still going up and we were being challenged every day, we put forth a law to make it a felony to carry illegal guns on our streets. It didn't get passed. But illegal guns, we got more guns in this country than we have people. We are killing people just much too often. And the days of having a discussion or even a fight or a black eye, those days are gone. And we need to get back to learning how to mediate, have conversations, and agree to disagree without being combative. And this society has become so combative, and the value of life has been lost. Anytime a 7-year-old can be sitting in a car and somebody's firing out of the car and somebody's firing in the car, you've placed a 7-year-old's life in danger. Anytime a child can sit on a parking lot and somebody shoots in your car to kill you intentionally, we got assassinations going on in our city. It's not like people running over to some community that is not theirs, to shoot somebody. These are folks who know each other. 89% of the people who come in contact with the criminal justice system have been in contact with the criminal justice system 9 to 11 times. So part of being able to deal with your problem is to understand your problem. And so I tell people, and that's why I'm grateful every single day, and I say that everything I've done to this moment has prepared me to lead the city as well as to serve it, because I understand where we are. I know that in 2015 and 16, we froze police positions in this city that caused us to lose 700 police officers, nearly 700 police officers. And what people don't know is at the same time we were freezing police positions, police officers were leaving, 25 a month. So do the math. And so, like right now, the city council has, there's a discussion with one of the committees not to do to pass the supplemental for the overtime that's already spent. I guess it's to send a message. But the reality is that I wasn't here in 15 and 16 when you all froze police positions and lost nearly 700 police officers over a 2-year period. And so people, regardless of whatever the condition is and the work that we have to do, people want to see police officers walking up and down their streets because it helps them to feel safe. And we have to get to that. But with 1,900, when I walked in, police officers, now about 2,300, because we've gotten that attrition rate down to 14 a month. And you see where I'm going. Even if I'm adding 5 to 6 classes of 40 a year, I've got to do more so that I can get in front of the attrition rate. I've got to hire to cover the attrition rate, and I've got to hire to get to the number that I need, because if I don't, you know what happens, and this is what's happening. Because we don't have enough police officers get, some folks want to work overtime. Our police officers are being drafted to work overtime, because you got to have people on the street. And I challenge them, anyone, go to a roll call and see how many police officers are standing there ready to hit your street. You would be appalled. And so I am appalled that we're not where we need to be, and I'm not satisfied that we're getting there quick enough. But what we have done, and because you asked me how is it and why is it going down? So I guess it was around, we're a Bloomberg city. We're one of 32 or 36 cities around the world. We're a Bloomberg city, which means that I participate with 36 other mayors around the country. And sometimes we're in a classroom like this, and sometimes we're, connected by wireless, and we converse. And one of the things I said, we always talk about how we do things differently. And so I'm in there and I'm thinking, I said, I wonder what it'd be like if I were to take my command staff of the police department, put it in the same room with agency people who are empowered to act, housing, public works, recreation, liquor board, late night licensed people, health department, sanitation. What would it be like if I put them all in the room at the same time? Because what I learned was that when a police officer would ask for help from a city agency, it would take 7 to 14 days for them to get a response. Because we're also dealing with other responses. That has gone from 1.5 to 2 days. And what has resulted is, we call it the Violence Reduction Initiative. Every Monday through Friday at the police department at 8 a.m. in the morning, you can see them all engaged, working together. And that collaboration, along with the call to action, the ceasefire, all of those things, because we embrace it, I believe has helped us to reduce violence. So we started seeing our first reduction in November when we opened up the program with them working together. November it dropped 18%, December 12%, January it dropped, February, March. April we experienced an uptick, May back down. June, a little bit of a decrease, and right now still experiencing a decrease in violence, but an overall reduction in homicides in the city around 20%.
Thank you so much, and I'm aware that you have another engagement.
I'm okay.
Yeah, you good?
We're going to finish.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take your question.
I have a question. So I've been listening, and I think that you're trying to increase the number of police officers on the street, but for me, it's not necessarily the number, but the quality. Do these people understand the community they're serving? Because a lot of the times, especially with a lot of report that talks about the corruption, the level of corruption in the Baltimore police system. What are we doing to make sure we're not hiring just anybody?
So again, I hear you. So again, one of the things I talked about very early on was that we have a 163-page report from the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice requires us to do certain training for our police officers. So now we have quality training going on in our police department. We're requiring our police officers to walk our streets, but they have to go through quality training. The other thing you should understand as well is that there was no technology in this police department. In 1997, they started putting body cameras and computers in police cars in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, but not in Baltimore City. So immediately what I did was go to the state, brought $2 million in, put computers in all of our cars. We have body cameras on our police officers, because not only does it protect the citizen, it also protects the police officers, because now you get to see what they're doing every single day. And then we've added additional cameras in our city because we want folks to see what's going on in our city. Training is optimal. We don't do any short-sightedness on training. We make sure, and we've added additional training, cultural diversity training in our police department. So I invite you, if you would love to see a training class that's taking place, we invite you to do that. We also have, we have a lot of our African Americans who were not able to get into the police department. So, and then, so one, we've raised the salary for police officers. Secondly, we've created a program a cadet program that starts in the high school level, because you can't become a police officer until you're 21. And so at 18 years of age, you can go into our cadet program. And we're partnering actually here with the University of Baltimore to help us to educate young people in our city to become police officers. We've increased the number of individuals from the city to become police officers. We also have now engaged in a program that allows reduced rent for police officers to live in our city. We want people in our city to become police officers. We need to increase the number of African Americans and other people of color and women on our police force. And so that's where our focus is. You know, it's not just about policing, it's about community engagement. And that's part of what we're teaching our police officers today.
I'm sorry, I won't take that.
I want to get some other folks.
I'm sorry, we'll maybe take another question. I'll just have to give you a final question, which is, everyone says women should get mentors, we should get mentors. How did you get mentors? Because some of us find it so difficult to approach people that we want to mentor. But it seems like you've had mentors in your career. How did you go about getting them?
Well, I would say my greatest mentor was my mother. Because my parents taught me, my mother and father both taught me that we can be anything that we want to be, we just have to work hard for it. And I've always embraced women, especially women to engage them in leadership, and I just wanted to share with you what we've done since I've been in office. We maintained our health commissioner, Dr. Leanne Wynn, who is a female. Our labor commissioner, Deborah Moore Carter, is an African-American female. My chief of staff, Kimberly Morton, is an African-American female. The chief procurement officer for the city is Erin Smith, who is a female. The director of government relations is an African-American female. The senior director of public affairs, Tony Miller, is an African-American female. The director of the Department of Transportation, Michelle Bouchou, is an African-American female. The executive director of the Housing Authority of Baltimore City is Janet Abrams, an African-American female. The Enoch Pratt Library CEO is a female, the Baltimore City Public Schools CEO, Sonia St. Elisa's, who I control in terms of the board appointees, is an African-American female. The executive director of the Baltimore Convention Center, Peggy Diaz, is a female. The executive director of Live Baltimore, Andy Miller, is a female. The director of logistics and special assistance to the mayor, Jerry Bird, is an African-American female. The executive director of the Environmental Control Board, Rebecca Woods, is a female. The director of the Baltimore City Department of Social Services is an African-American female. The director of the Mayor's Office of Sustainable Solutions is an African-American female. The director of the Mayor's Office of Immigration and Multicultural Affairs is a female. The director of the Office of Constituent Services, Daphne Williams, is an African-American female. The director of the General Manager of Charm City TV is an African-American female. The Chief Executive Officer of the Baltimore Office of Promotion and Arts, Donna Sawyer, is an African-American female. The Deputy Chief of Information Services Officer is Deidre Hollins, is an African-American female. The Deputy Health Commissioner is an Asian female. The Deputy Director of Government Relations is an African-American female. And the Deputy Director, who was the Director of the Civil Rights and Wage Enforcement, is an African-American female. The reason that I share that with you all is because we have to lead by example. You know, we are our worst critics. We will tear each other down before we build each other up. We will find ways to be negative as opposed to being positive. What I look for in our female population is strength and leadership. My Deputy Director of Government Relations, I met at the age of 19. She was a student at Coppin State University who walked across the campus and said, somebody, Senator, needs to pay attention to Coppin State University's budget. I said, well, why don't you do it? You'll come in turn with me. And so she has grown tremendously, has lobbied, has become a lobbyist. I think it's important to mentor. I had 5 young people in Annapolis that I mentored, you know, during my period of time that they were there. One was my executive director for the Black Caucus, who is now a VP at Pepsi Cola. I moved her from there. I said, look, I don't need you to stay here. I need you to go out there and get some experience. We worked her into becoming a lobbyist in Annapolis, and now she's an officer at one of the largest corporations here. That's what we're supposed to do for each other. Figure out how we love each other. Figure out how we can lift each other up. Let's not throw each other under the bus. I've seen it. I've walked in rooms and you can feel the anger and the frustration, or I want to get you in a got you moment. Instead of trying to get me in a got you moment, figure out how you can get me to where we're trying to go as a city. Because we want to move our city forward. Learn how to love one another. Love one another. Seriously, I tell people I get so happy every day when I get up to go do this work. I pinch myself that I get to do this work. We brought back last week, and I know there's a question on there about your accomplishments. In 19 months, $30 million HUD grant that they've been working on for years. I brought in an African-American female janitor and said, go get this. $30 million that will attract $800 million that will transform East Baltimore. When I became mayor, I said I wanted mobile units to move around our city and help people get jobs. Someone donated $500,000. That mobile unit is now on the streets of our city. I said we won't sell off our assets of our city. When there was a proposal on my desk to sell garages, I said, no. Y'all sold the airport some 40 years ago for $36 million. Can you imagine if we'd have leased it as opposed to selling it? Because that 40 years is up. It was up 10 years ago. Can you imagine the value that that would have to our city? So we didn't do that. We kept the garages. We leased them. We will earn tax dollars off of them. We floated bonds and we generated $50 million to create an investment fund to invest in neighborhoods and communities that have been underinvested in for decades. We will change this city. But it's how we continue to work together. And so, I don't know if we have any more questions.
We would love to continue asking questions, but I know that if I shoot this time, when we come back, they'll say, no, you weren't good the first time. So I want to really thank you. I want to thank you for honoring our invitation, and I want to give you a Nigerian name, because many of us here are Nigerians, and the Nigerian name is Oluwaseun. That is, we're thankful, God, we're thankful to God. So thank you so much for your help. And we have some little gifts here. I know you're a writer, so I put 2 of my own books here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, for you to read. And then courtesy of
I'll send you mine.
Oh, please, yes. Please. I'd love to have it. And courtesy of our super entrepreneur and our sponsor, Share Radiance, we also have some nice shea butter and African soap
big
for you
fan.
as well. Thank you so much.
Some African soap when I walked in. But let me just say this to you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to share with you all. But I leave you with just this one thought, and that is that together we are so strong. Yes. And when you see your sisters of color, sisters of all races, embrace, love, cherish, lift, and push forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.